So I'm joined today by Grace Is it Clemens or Clement? I'm never sure,
No,
Clemens. Yeah,
fine.
I've got a habit of butchering people's apologize. So Grace Clemens, who just talking in the green room, I've established is in Barcelona in, I guess, sunny Spain. It's got to be sunnier than the UK for sure.
Yep, it's sunny today.
And Grace, your company is styled by Grace, is that right?
So my freelance is styled by Grace Clemens. GraceClemens.com is my website, but my marketing agency is SGC Marketing. We don't have a website yet, but that's another story for another time, but that's a work in progress. But that stands for Strategy, Growth, and Communication. So what I do is I do digital marketing audits for e-commerce brands or nonprofits and B2B companies as well. And if you choose to implement the findings in that audit in-house, you can choose to do so, or you can choose to implement with SGC Marketing, where I have a team of handpicked freelancers, custom team made to your audit and what you need for your strategy.
What was it that made you choose specifically as your sort of method of attack for the digital marketing ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would have to credit the e-commerce path that I chose to go down to a manager of mine back in one of my first full-time gigs in the early social media days. I was working for a B2B company, and my manager there said to me, he said, "You need to be in e-commerce. That's where you belong." And that really stuck with me. And I moved forward and ended up working at B2C for 5 years with a company in London. So the small sort of piece of advice that always stuck with me, that I always realized I really enjoy e-commerce. That's where I have the most fun. So that's where, when I chose to niche down, I chose e-commerce. But that's not to say that I don't, I'm working with people outside of that realm and those businesses outside of that realm. Now, for audits, the reason that I chose audits is because after over a decade in working in marketing, that's just something that I've noticed that over my entire career, whether I'm coming on board as a contractor or a full-time employee, an audit is where I start. An audit is the best place to start for a marketer because that's a great onboarding process. They're getting to know the ins and outs of the company and your content and how you speak and how you exist. But also, it's how you find the low-hanging fruit and the long-term strategy, really. So that's just where I always start. And so I felt that's just the best place to start, because that's where you want to start with finding where the company is now and where they want to go in the future.
So one of the things I've always found is that, again, I've worked with a lot of e-commerce businesses. Generally speaking, I don't necessarily say I go in and do an audit, but I guess in a roundabout way, I kind of am. One of the things I always look at is, where are they leaving money on the table? And I think for me, it's amazing. So you see some hugely successful businesses that are doing like 7-8 figures, still leaving a ton of money on the table. So even though they're deemed to be successful to the outside world, there are still some glaring errors that they're making when it comes to their strategy and execution. What are the typical things that you find when you're invited to do an audit with somebody? What's typically the things that you look for, and what are the things that you find more frequently than not?
Yeah. So the most frequent thing that I find is actually just having an aligned digital footprint. And that is surprising to me as a marketer, but it is number one thing I see is your branding aligned from email to web to every single platform? And I'm talking about your bio, making sure that that bio reads the same. It can be a little bit different, but overall, when you pull up, if you were to sit at your computer screen and pull up every single platform that your company exists on and look at it across the screen, are you seeing consistency? That's the number one thing that I see companies, which is so simple, and it needs to be checked on. I think it's easy when you have a couple hands in the pot as well. If you're a larger business, sometimes it's easy to overlook that one profile might have an old branding look on it than another might, and especially the bios. Bios are going to vary from platform to platform because of how each platform and the CTAs work. But overall, the messaging is going to be the same. So that's the number one thing that I see companies mistake of. Number two is making sure your content has purpose. So when people land on there, it's clear who you are, what you do, and why they should follow you, what they're going to gain you on that channel. Email standpoint, I would say automations and flows is the first place that I look at, just to make sure, again, like those low-hanging fruit. Do you have welcome funnels on? Welcome funnels are an easy win for e-commerce brands. Sometimes people don't have these ones on. Your abandoned basket carts, your miss you, haven't seen you in 6 months, you haven't shopped. As well as back in stock is a massive winner. That's something that I founded at a fashion company a while back. And that was just every single time it was a winner. So automations and flows is a number one place that I also check when I'm doing an audit, just to make sure that you have all of those low-hanging fruits. Set it, forget it, come back in the quarter and check it.
And one of the things I've always found, even though I primarily run paid advertising for clients, we look at the whole business in terms of all the infrastructure, because it's all dependent upon each other. Yes, we do paid ads, but we care about SEO. So we need to make sure that the pages load quickly, that their images are optimized for speed. Email, make sure that they've got all of those sorts of things, the simple things. One of the main reasons people stop it is because they forget that they've got it. If you're selling supplements that sit in a drawer and you are on a 30-day auto ship, if they're, hang on a minute, I've still got a box of these that you sent me before. I don't need them now, so I'm going to cancel it. It's that bonding sequence of saying, hey, how are you getting on with this? This is what we found. People, once they get to this stage, this is where they have. So again, we make sure that we align the messaging in the paid ads with the messaging in the email sequences that go out with people. So I think we tend to act more like a conductor of an orchestra, because what tends to happen, the reason some of these businesses fail is they have everything working in a silo. So the email team work just on email, and the paid search work just on paid search, and the organic social, just organic social. They don't all talk to each other, and they don't really join the dots between them. And that's always one of the easiest quick wins that you can put in place to say, look, you guys need to talk to each other. And we can help facilitate that. So we would say, we'll do invite you all to it. That way we can all agree what the strategy for execution is going to be done by. Again, things like PPC, we always say, you've got to have dedicated landing pages that are no index, no follow, and you strip away all the stuff that is noise, because ultimately you just want them to do one thing. If it's buy a product, buy a product. If it's sign up for an ebook, sign up for the ebook. Everything else can be introduced down the line. So yes, we want to build a relationship with them socially, but not immediately. I'd rather get them to do what I want them to do first, and then introduce the fact that we have social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be. You can do that after the event. If they don't, saying, hey, sign up for my YouTube is kind of pointless, because if they don't like the experience they had on your website, they're not going to come back regardless of which social channels they look at. It's just not going to vibe with them. So do you have a sweet spot in terms of the size of companies that you like to work with?
I would say it really varies. What changes is where I start with the approach. Of course, I'm always going to different for a company that is well into, say, 10 years into their social strategy or their multi-channel strategy. That audit is going to look completely different because the benchmarks are already set. The goals are already set. There's a lot of larger data pools to work with to move forward with confidence. Whereas a startup, I'm going to be setting benchmarks a lot more. And maybe there's been a gap in data and I'll have to look back at old data. But that you're starting from a little scratch where you're actually filling up the data pool, right? So that's where it changes. It's not, can I work with you? It's how I'm going to work with you, I guess, right? Where we're going to start in the approach. That's something also I see common. I offer free 15-minute social media audits for businesses. So that's something that I commonly see. I can give a lot of surface level feedback to smaller companies, whereas higher level companies, again, that are 5 to 10 years into their strategy, I'm going to have to see in the back end to be able to give some really
15-minute thing is kind of like it's a mutual, I'm checking them out and they can check me out, because I think a lot of people blindly go into pitches that maybe they ought not to go into. And if you have the opportunity to have a 15-minute conversation with somebody to begin with, you can get a feel for whether it's actually worth pursuing it for a longer, bigger commitment. I've talked to people before where I've done a sort of 15-minute, let's just have a discussion and see how things work. And you can pick up a vibe from the person that you're talking to. that they probably wouldn't be a good company to work with. So it's easy for you to, at that point in time, to just offer them some, hey, I don't think this is going to work for us. And at that point in time, you can duck out rather than having to go down the full blown, you produce everything. And a lot of people just want to pick your brains or kick the tires or whatever and never really have any intention to engage you. They just want to get in some free information that you might ordinarily be charging consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. And in most cases, I have found that people really enjoy the audit. And it's more so to give them an opportunity as well to see what it is that they're going to get out of an audit, because it might not really be clear like why it's worth spending money on an audit. It also might not be clear, why should I hire somebody outside of my internal team? Most marketing teams do monthly audits and quarterly audits, as they should. But actually, it's always good to get a little fresh perspective, especially if you've been honing in on the strategy for over 2 years. Getting that outsider perspective can give you a fresh take on things and maybe spot some things that your internal team might not be able to because they've been in it for so long.
And I always find sometimes to an outsider with expertise looking in than it is for the people internally. They just don't see the challenges that are so readily available and obvious to people that are not working day to day in the business. So that new pair of eyes looking at it can give you a completely different perspective. I'm always amazed how many people invite you in, they want your help. When you start giving them critique, they start getting defensive. And it's like, oh, hang on, I'm not attacking you here, right? I'm here to help. I'm not here to hurt. But you've got to take this feedback in the spirit in which it's given. I'm trying to help your business. And these are things that we need to fix. If we fix this first, this will have an impact pretty quickly. And these are the things we need to work on over the next 3, 6, 12 months. I think a lot of people that you work with, if more than you just blowing smoke up their ass, and that's not really what they want. They need help. And sometimes that candid opinion from a neutral third party can be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I've found in general, CEOs will never argue with data in most cases. So I'm lucky. I've never had somebody take offense to any of the feedback that I've given. But that's the beauty of data-driven feedback is it's not personal. It's the data.
Yeah, you must be better at giving feedback than I am. I've had
Yeah, maybe it's
I've always kind of, like sometimes I kind of go in and I've got like a chainmail fist with a silk glove on. You take it off and whack them in the face, and they go, "Wow, that really hurt." I with the best intentions, I want to make sure that their business succeeds, and sometimes it is a case of they're doing stuff internally, so there's things that they can fix themselves. Some of it will be what their competitors are doing. I used to work with startups, and then I really got to the point where I hated working with them. I know you said you'll sometimes work with startups. One of the reasons I didn't like working with startups was quite often they had come from, say, bigger companies. They'd worked as execs in a sort of big company, got laid off, and they set up their own thing. They still have the mentality, the brain set of they're an executive working for a big company. The reality of it is and they need to act like a startup. They need to be scrappy and punchy and all the things that big businesses tend not to do because they have that sort of architecture that really prevents them being able to be that nimble sort of startup environment, right? And for me, it's always one of those things. Like what you tend to find is that they feel entitled, and I don't want to get into those kind of conversations. So generally speaking, if somebody approaches me, one of the reasons I say is I've set the floor at 1 million is usually if somebody is doing $1 million of business, they're not a startup. They're not brand new. It's not a brand new business. And they want to go in and they want to be like, they want to be the biggest company in the sector, but they've got the tiniest budget. So they have to set their stall out according to their sort of environment at that particular point in time. Great, have the ambition, but you need to be a bit more realistic about it.
And what's coming to mind as well in terms of like feedback in general is actually leaning on the customer feedback. Is if you're not happy with the feedback, the customers are the people who literally will not back. And we see it on social media. And actually, that's another part that feeds into your overarching strategy. So an example is coming up with the campaign, and it became for an e-commerce brand was breastfeeding dresses. So for Silk Fred, which is a UK-based fashion marketplace.
Mhm.
So we classify everything based on party dresses, what's new, where you can wear things. But during an audit, we noticed a lot of customers talking about breastfeeding. So we tested that. We put out some breastfeeding content. Lo and behold, our customer feedback, that was a number one hit for us. It sold a ton. It sold thousands, 15,000 in an email. Example of how we use customer feedback to then feed into the e-commerce strategy. So I think looking at audits as not only your data dashboards, but your customer feedback, because that's going to have a ton of data. That's not actually numbers, but some of the best data I found for Silkfred was in the customer feedback.
So, as you say, like analyzing that data is important. Do you have any sort of particular tools or techniques that you kind of use to gather that information and analyze it? Or is it just export it in and view it in a spreadsheet?
Circumstantial to what the company's budget really is and what the company's objective is. So for a B2B company, I might have a lower end third party social media tool that collects and gives me overall engagement rate. For a company, a B2C, that social drives ROI a little bit higher, I might be investing more in something like Sprout or Later that gives me much higher level dashboards. So I'm looking directly in each social media platform, because sometimes you can find a couple, surprise pieces of data. But overall, I'm looking at the overall data as well in the third-party dashboard. I'm looking in your website data, so most likely GA4, or if you have any other HubSpot CRM tools that you're using. And I'm looking in your email marketing. So probably Klaviyo, maybe MailChimp, depending on what you use. And then any other back end. So like if you have a place where you are collecting customer testimonials, I might, look through those. If you have a place that you has any really winning comments that you've gotten on social media, anything like that. And obviously I'm going to look at all your paid, wherever you have paid ads going on.
So much cast in stone, but I usually will go into a kind of company, and I normally recommend that they should be spending 5 to 10% of their annual budget that they spend on advertising on technology to support the advertising, right? Whether it's a kind of like a tool to enable you to handle your Facebook comments. And I've always been stunned at how many brands allow people to post like competitor comments on their Facebook ads. I'm like, why are you guys allowing that to happen? It's because nobody's actually sitting there and monitoring it and jumping on it and making sure it gets prevented, right? So this is where some of the tools can really help to add value, because they're able to kind of go in there. I know you can set it up organically. You can say, these are words, if somebody types this in a comment, don't allow the comment to go through. Usually people use it for profanity, but you can as well use it for competitors. So somebody mentions a competitor in a comment, won't get posted. But I think generally speaking, we tend to invest money in tools like Lucky Orange, which again gives us the ability to understand the troubles that people are having by interacting with the website, right? We can see it in real time. We can look at do playbacks of and explain to them navigating your website, right? Because people always go, oh, they spent 5 minutes on the site, must be a really sticky site. Might be, no, they had a real problem getting to where they ultimately needed to get to. That's why they spent 5 minutes on the checkout, not because, right, they were looking at more products and, evaluating and everything else. We've all done it where you get a phone call, you go on the phone for 20 minutes, and then you go back to the page you were on and go, wow, that page must be really sticky. They spent 20 minutes on it. No, they probably had a phone call, needed to go to the toilet, make a cup of tea. There's so many things that could happen as a result of that. And if you analyze and look at it, because I've always maintained that not all page views are equal value, because we've always said that if you have a long, let's say you've got a very, very long product description page, and you've got images and descriptions and videos and all that sort of stuff, to understand and see how people are navigating that information. And again, if you have a scroll event that happens in Google Analytics or Facebook with your Facebook pixel, you can say they got to 25% of the page, 50% of the page, 75%. There's a video on there. You want to see how much time of the video. So let's say it's a 30-second video. you somebody that watches it for 3 seconds, and people always go, oh, it's this 3-second hook. I get it, right? The reality of it is that if the most important message is at 10 seconds, I'm much more concerned about how many people saw that than saw the first 3 seconds. Because the 3 seconds might be, gets them to, hooks them in, right? But if they don't see the 10-second point, so if you have a 50%, 75% event that happens to say they watched 50% of that video, you can create an audience of people that saw that. And then from there, you can inform what the next step in the process needs to be in terms of, right, now that they've seen that video, they should see this one. They still haven't bought, they should see this video next. That moves them along the kind of production line towards the checkout, right? So yeah, as a general rule, 5 to 10% of the money on external tools, whether it's analytics, whether it's data capture, sentiment analysis, all that sort of stuff, really important, I think, for people that are trying to understand, right? It's that 10% they might spend on tools, on more ads, and they just won't really know what's going on.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with the listening tools, because that falls right into community management. And it's funny because I've had the discussion with so many business owners of whether or not they should invest that money in listening tools. And the answer is always yes, just because that's where you find the opportunities that are the big wins, right? This is what you're strategizing, so you create time for yourself to catch the big wins. And I'm going to use an example. There was a recent TikTok trend. It was like, hear your voice. It was like a prayer with Madonna, and you swipe and it's like a Muppet on fire, and it's storytelling. And this was going viral, viral, viral. And there was one story in particular. It's disgusting. It's about a girl who sat in poop on the NYC subway, but it went incredibly viral, and she had rented a specific jeans. Well, this story went so viral that the company whose jeans that she had rented when she had sat in this disgustingness, they were able to get in touch. They posted another story explaining how they reached out, they refunded her, 5-10 years later. And that was an example of how listening. And they went super viral, like this company that I've never heard of. Many people hadn't heard of. And they're on, Lululemon's kind of average price point checkout. And that's a great example of, that's why you strategize time to listen and catch those moments to act in real time.
And I mean, virtually every guest I've had on the podcast since the very beginning, at some point in time, talking about AI, right? And again, I don't know what your thoughts are on AI. I found AI is phenomenal for kind of, again, doing some of the kind of the heavy lifting on things that maybe you used to have to do manually, right? You can just kind of throw a bunch of data at it and say, this is all the data that I have. These are all the comments I've got, right? Analyze them and kind of break them down in terms of sentiment analysis and, what are the common things that people kind of come up with, word clouds, all that sort of stuff, right? Because again, if the average people, again, if they look at it and go, wow, this is really, because we've had 500 comments. If 480 of the comments are negative, that's not a good kind of look, right? Because people are going to read the comments and go, wow, this must be a horrible company, right? I'm not going to buy from them because nobody likes the product at all, right? They're all kind of, don't ever buy this, it's horrible, don't do it, right? And and I think a lot of the success will come from how do you handle that, right? How do you kind of handle those sorts of situations? So do you give your clients advice as part of the audit process in terms of how they should be handling those negative sentiment comments?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You should have a crisis team on hand who's trained to handle that. And you should be training your customer service team or whoever is doing the community management on how to handle those types of situations. For me, it's all about reflection. I deleted a TikTok comment that was negative a few weeks ago, and I really actually regretted it, because I felt upon reflection that it was a great time for me to come back with a response. But for businesses, you have to set the bar. For one, you have to protect your teams. So, make sure that there is a guideline set of what is not tolerable. Like if that is actually affecting your team, then they should have permission to report, block, do what they need to. Versus if it is a customer who is rightfully upset and has a right to be voicing that, well, then you just want to make sure hearing the need to be heard, because negative comments are there for an opportunity to improve as a business. So I would encourage people to not automatically don't make your reflex to delete. Stop and reflect on it. Think about how you want to respond, and obviously consider your team's mental health and safety.
Say that I think some of the brands that are maybe community-led, community-driven, right? Quite often the community will rally to the defense of the brand, right? If somebody attacks them, they're the ones that kind of go in there and they go, that's not the experience I've had, and really kind of like, you know, if you like, they'll put out the fire on your behalf, right? You don't have to necessarily do it. You just have to. I always say it's a little bit like Big Brother. You throw booze into a house and put in cameras and record it and just sit back and watch what happens, right? So I think sometimes that can happen in the same way with communities. Like, you know, you don't need to be the person that's driving the conversation within the community, right? You will have people that will be, again, some people will be, they'll just align with your brand, right? And feel kind of connected to it, and they'll take part. They'll comment on every Facebook post you put up there, and they'll share it, and you know, they'll do things. And again, I'm always amazed at how few brands recognize those people and kind of, if you like, lift them up and say, hey, look, you know, you are most popular commenters. We'd love to kind of give you something, a special discount just for you, or something like that, right? Because those are the advocates. Again, if you said, hey, could you leave me a review on Yelp or something, to do it because people, they're trying to get sort of feedback from and reviews from people that may you don't know if they've had a good experience, right? Whereas if somebody's bought from you 10 times in the past and they always spend $50, $100 a time, right? Then that person is not going to go, I don't like this company, but I buy the product anyway, right? They're going to go, they love it. Service is great, and so on and so on, right? And those are the people that you would say, you can't ask for a 5-star review, but you almost say, I'm going to get a 5-star review.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Is literally the beauty of having a business with purpose. Like, that is the beauty of, if you do your marketing with pure intent and you just do it because that's what you feel like your company and that's your values and you feel passionate about it, that is going to translate into an audience who supports you and has your back. That's so important. And, you know, I've seen influencers, people have made videos about them saying, you know, this person, blah, blah, blah. And I've seen in the comments, all of their audience came to their rescue, you know, just like you were saying, and saying, no, 5 years. And, you know, we trust her. And so I think that's just evidence. And that's what I feel passionate about when I do marketing, is the brands that have great products and have a real genuine reason to exist, and are bringing something exciting and valuable to the world, something that makes us feel something. And then I would also just add to making sure that you listen and highlight your VIPs. That was something that during my time at Silkfred, all of us were really good at, is picking out our VIPs and rewarding them. So we often brought customers into the office for shoot days, workshops. We even brought one of our VIP customers in for a date night in London with her husband, and treated them to a nice hotel and a nice dinner, and brought her in and gifted her some clothes. And, you know, that is one of the things I will say Silkfred is a great example of, is they really listen to their customers, and they see the VIPs and they say thank you and they reward them. And I think that's something that you should really keep in mind when you're looking at your collaboration strategy. Are you collaborating with influencers? Brilliant. But are you collaborating with your customers? Because you should be, if you're not.
People that are using AI to generate user-generated content. And I'm thinking, To me, that's wrong. The best users are your actual users. I'm looking for unprofessional videos with bad audio. I'm not looking influencer that you could give them any product. Oh, this is the most amazing thing. It used to bother me immensely when you'd see 22-year-old women rubbing aging cream into their face. Look how soft it makes my skin look. It's like, you're 22 years old, for God's sake. I just couldn't understand why anyone would buy it. But I think it's probably because the audience, the target audience, they look at that and they aspire to be that, right? That's probably why it succeeds. I always remember telling me that you mentioned like Lululemon. Tends to happen is that the people that can afford to buy Lululemon are typically, say, men above 45 or 40 or whatever, right? But the people that they use in their ads are all men in their 20s, because the men are over 40 aspire to be the men in their 20s. So they put on this skin tight shirt and it looks hideous on them, but it looks great on the model, right? And that's why they can afford the product. Whereas the 22-year-old probably can't afford it unless they're an influencer or something like that. So for me, it's quite interesting why people use certain methods in their advertising. You go, well, that doesn't make sense. But for me, the whole thing with UGC, I'm very anti it unless it's genuine user generated content. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you 100%. I think AI is a great tool. I use it daily for a lot of things that I think for AI, the people who are going to be most successful with it, the people in the brands, are the ones that know how to feed it versus asking for it. So if you ask ChatGPT to give you YouTube content idea, a script, it will. But one, it won't be from your heart. It won't be what you know in here. So it will come out differently. It will come out less authentic. Versus if you feed chat, here's my idea, here's what I want to say, lay it out into a nice script so I can organize it. That's where you're going to get a much higher quality thing. AI is not, I don't think AI should be involved with creating UGC unless it is cleaning up something you already have, organizing something you have. Like, hey, I have these 10 testimonials that I want to push out and I want to, can you organize it, a calendar for me and dates? So I look at AI more for doing the work faster for me that I already, I would be doing, but I'm not asking it to start from scratch. That's different. It's just, you're not going to have quality. You're not going to have authentic. It's not going to engage people the way that, real humans do.
So there's a guy who I know. He's just set up it's like a new project. I really knew him through. He was big in audio, so I think he came from a sort of broadcasting background in radio. He would talk about all the various tools that you can use, Adobe Audition and Premiere Pro and stuff like that. But he's got into now, and I was watching one of his videos the other day, and he was talking about Notion AI. I've been using Notion for forever, but I thought it'd be interesting to give Notion AI kind of a bit of a try, and he had a video on it. I think it's called Creator Magic. Is kind of like this board is all spaces that you have in there is just amazing. I mean, so what he does is every YouTube video that he's created, he gets the transcript downloaded and uploaded into Google Drive. He then can analyze the transcript, and he'll be able to kind of say, show me all the videos where I talked about X or Y, and it'll spit out all the videos, give the context. He's got a YouTube style guide. So it's basically, he'll say, yes, write me a script, but he'll say, this is the style in which I want you to do it. So the hook and the intro and the outro and call to action, all that sort of stuff, it's all laid out, but it's all in the style of his voice. So the script will be more relevant to the way in which he would do it, right? Rather than it being just a cheesy one that Mr. Beast might use. Mr. Beast works because it's Mr. Beast. Lots of people have tried to replicate it, but failed miserably in the process, right? Whereas if you have a guide for yourself, right, in the same way that I think a lot of people will lean into using like things like Hey Gen, and you can create your own sort of custom avatar. So eventually you'll get to the point where your customer service could be conducted by somebody that maybe looks like you, sounds like you, talks like you because you've trained it to talk that way, but is answering the questions that, again, every business usually has a list of probably the 10 questions that virtually every single person will ask before they make a commitment. Here's where you can go and read the FAQ. They might be able to kind of go, hey, can you tell me how to do this? And then the AI chatbot, right, can actually respond to them, but it doesn't look so like stale and sterile. It's more of an interactive process. But equally, I'm not saying you would just sit back and leave that to get on with it. You would still need to monitor it, supervise it, make sure it's actually doing what you expect it to do. But some of them are like really, really kind of getting on and are very, very close to being where they need to be, right? But, I think a lot of it is, if you can train your agents with your book of business, your book, your like how you handle things, again, I think so many businesses will be able to take some of the, I call it grunt work, but some of the work that doesn't necessarily need to be done by your highly expensive, by a lesser entity, to allow that marketing person to then focus on other aspects within the business.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some interest in these AR, training. I played around with one the other day where I wanted to see what it would be like if I created a VR, an AR, like augmented myself, and see how it would be. I think there might be some opportunities for brands there. Yeah, if you have, say, I know a lot of e-commerce brands, like a face of the brand that records a lot of the content. So people are used to seeing a person on TikTok. So that might be a useful thing. But and it's a thin line, but there's that small piece of human connection. You miss the mark on that. And it's a very thin line. The minute the audience picks up, I think that's what, as a society, we're going to have to just learn that what that small line is, right? And again, I think this is where it falls into the marketer's hands, is that's just part of the skill, is knowing if that human authenticity part is still in there, even if it's created by AI.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
there are
I can use like AI to write ads for clients, right? But I tend not to, right? I have a better understanding of what the client's objectives are because, in a lot of cases I've been working with them a long time, right? And I also know or Facebook or Microsoft might accept when it comes to ad copy, right? And where the red flags would start to kick in, you ad disapproved, and sometimes that can jeopardize the whole ad account, right? Or the business manager even, right? I mean, I was working with a client where they were outsourcing. So we were running their paid social. I suggested we got some kind of, if you like, UGC videos created. So they hired a social agency to do that. They came in, they started creating, and some of the ads, I looked at them and thought, they're really good, right? But they don't necessarily align with the ideal client persona that we know exists. It's not really aligned with that. We kept going with it anyway. Then we had a sort of situation where, because their business manager had been associated with all these other stuff, right? They had a problem that their business manager got sort of blocked. So basically their ads were being disabled in our ad account until we disconnected them from the business manager, right? And we were sort of the existing agency and they were just a sort of secondary agency. So we were able to unplug them. Had we been the only agency that's all been done through us, we'd have lost that account, right? And I think sometimes that's where there is this, you need to understand where the limit is and walk it back a couple of steps from that. Because if you go too close to it, you'll end up getting burnt.
Absolutely.
So Grace, what do you see the kind of the next, because obviously you've been doing this for 13 years or so, something like that. Where do you see the future of the industry? Because again, I've always maintained, I still think we're in the infancy. Where do you think we're going? Where do you think we're heading?
That's a hard question right now. Obviously, with the TikTok ban looming, I don't think the TikTok ban is going to happen. But right now, I'm pretty concerned about the state of the algorithms. Like I'm noticing a shift in the quality of my news feeds on both X and Facebook, Instagram. So I think as a user and as a marketer, I'm definitely concerned, but I think it will be an interesting 6 months. I don't think I have an answer on what's going to happen, but I do think that as marketers, just it's important for us to stay true to our values in the coming, times, just because things are changing on the algorithms and we don't have control over that. So ensuring that you're doing what you can to, met expectations, understanding and in the loop as to what's going on with Meta and with X, because these things are changing day to day right now. I think the most important thing for the next 6 months to 12 months for social media and for marketers in general for e-commerce businesses is to make sure you keep a multi-channel strategy. I've always said that before, and I've always said that because we've seen outages on WhatsApp, Meta. It happens. It does. And whether or not it's hacking, that is just, it's like the electricity. Sometimes the electricity goes out. We're 2025, but it still happens sometimes.
That always made me laugh. When Facebook went down, everyone was going to X to complain about Facebook being down. It's like, come on.
So, but that is why it's so important. You have a multi-channel strategy so your customers can go find you somewhere else if there is an outage, or if there is some sort of reason that your business does not want to be on that platform. Out. They're a great company to look at. They took a stand on social media. They still exist on social media. You can find them. They just don't exist on Facebook anymore. So you can exist on social without being on social if your business feels like that is something that you feel you need to stand strong for your values. I've considered leaving X myself, but we'll see how things go.
It always makes me
But
laugh when people do that. They like I've started to use Threads a lot more. It's almost like the early days of Twitter when things were nice and people were friendly and helpful, encouraging, giving positive feedback rather than just ripping into people. But what's really interesting, I've seen so many people come over to Threads. They post exactly the same stuff that they were posting on X, clearly not getting that they felt they were getting or they felt they deserved, announcing to everyone, I've tried this for a week and it's not really worked out and I'm going to leave and I'm going to be on Blue Sky and here's how you can get hold of me. And I'm like, I kind of likened it to going to a party and people announcing that they're leaving the party. Just leave. Just if you want to go, just go, right? I actually like it when people say, I'm leaving Threads, I'm going to go to Blue Sky because I can unfollow them on Threads. I don't need to follow them. So if they're not going to post anything, why follow them? I'm not going to be there. It's not adding any value to my feed at all, right? If they're not posting anything. But I completely agree with you that people, in a lot of cases, they'll just go, we just do Google ads, or we just do Facebook ads, or we just do email, or we just do organic search. I think you need to have as many toes in as many kind of camps as you can for that very reason. You could have situations where, like I said, stuff goes down. You said stuff goes down. TikTok, yeah, I don't think TikTok's necessarily going to go anywhere, but it certainly put the frighteners on people. I think a lot of people are like, wow, I know it went down for, 12 hours or something. I think a lot of people never even thought it was going to get to that. I think ByteDance were like, okay, well, call our bluff. If you think we're going to comply with selling the company, it's not going to happen. So shut us down. And they did. And then obviously it's come back, but it's only come back with a sort of minus day of execution that could look completely different as a result of that. Right, Elon might go to Donald Trump, might go, Elon, you should kind of buy it. And I think honestly, if Elon Musk ends up owning, TikTok, I would say, right, that's it. I'm uninstalling it. I'm done. I don't want that. I mean, it's, as you say, like I think Twitter used to be great. I think ever since X has been sort of owned by Elon, it's just not been the same platform at all. Although I know a lot of people that still get some decent success with it. I'm still on it. I still use it from time to time, but just generally speaking, it's nowhere near what it used to be before.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot in my personal time, is just how much I really have loved the news feeds and the algorithms. And There's the filter bubble issue. That's a great book for anybody who's in the industry. Filter bubble. I think there's something to be said about popping your full filter bubble and seeing things outside of your idealisms. But there's also something to be said that there's a reason why we have a filter bubble. And I love what's in my bubble. And it makes me sad that that bubble might pop and it might change for the longer term. But we'll see how it goes. I think as humans and as marketers, stay true to ourselves, stay true to our values and keep a multi-channel strategy, like don't put pressure on yourself to create content for every single channel every single day. Not every company is able to do that. Only the big players are, unfortunately. But keep your profiles warm. If TikTok your number one channel, fine, but make sure to keep your funnel and that you are getting people from TikTok to email or to go into Instagram, or you have somewhere for that multi-channel strategy. It's only going to become more and more important. I do years time, we're only seeing more and more social media apps come on board. We've got RedNote now. I just downloaded that last week. So it's going to be interesting to see how the world splits our attention span up and where we decide to spend our time. So I think values are going to come into play now, especially with
I think as marketers, it's not for us to tell people where they should go. I mean, I've always maintained, like, if somebody decides that they're gonna play Candy Crush on the subway, and I can put an ad right through a programmatic exchange into Candy Crush while they're watching that on the subway, then I'm going to do that. It's not for me to go, Candy Crush is not a good placement, because they're the ones that have chosen to use Candy Crush. I'm not the one that's forced them to use it. They've chosen to use it, and I've still got an in with them, because I can use remarketing, and I can actually say, well, if they've been to my Facebook page, right, I want to remarket to them, or through programmatic and actually run ads that continue the conversation that we've started somewhere else, right? I want to make sure that there's that continuity right the way through.
Absolutely.
So Grace, when I ask my podcast guests to come on, right, I give them the kind of like the guest intake form. You are so comprehensive with all in terms of your omnipresent everywhere. So if people wanted to get in touch with you to take you up on your audit, where would you recommend that they do? Because all your details will be in the show notes. Where
GracieClemens.com, or you can head to LinkedIn-Grace Clemens. I'm on there as well. Find me on any social channel. I am a multi-channel marketer, so it's
you made it very hard for people not to find you, right? So
exactly. Yeah.
So Grace, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest today. It's been terrific. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day in Barcelona, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future. We see where you've got to and pick up the conversation at that point.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm wishing you a great 2025.
Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.